Right, let's start here on All Angles for you this hour. Residents of the Deep Kloof Hostel in Soweto are protesting over the lack of service delivery with access to water, their latest worry. The move comes a day after Johannesburg Water started its planned water shutdown until Thursday to start repairs at the Ekenhof pump station. Several of the city's suburbs in the south have been without water for days now. Let's go to Pule Letshwiti-Jones, who joins us now from Soweto. Pule, I see the protest has moved further down to Soweto, and I remember last week when we spoke to City Power, they did say this is something that would take about 3 working days, but I guess communities are growing impatient.
Yeah, definitely. Today we were, of course, in Soweto, and residents were complaining about not having water. In Ridgeway as well was the case yesterday when we visited the area. But currently we're in Braamfontein in Johannesburg, where we were attending the budget response and speech, of course, tabling the amount of money that will be used for the city's services by the MMC for Finance, Tata Morero. Of course, in his remarks, he has slammed the city's poor financial performance, saying that it achieved an operating deficit of about 1 billion against a budgeted operating surplus of 1.1 billion, and also saying the metro was losing a significant amount to electricity and water losses, which peaked in June as well, 2022. So that paints a bleak image of how the city has not been performing quite well financially, but he's also said that the previous administration was supposed to be held accountable for this. He joins me right now. Mr. Morero, thank you very much for speaking to us. Just take us through the city's finances for Joburg residents watching. How is it looking like?
Well, I must say that we took a view that we need to correct the current status of the finances of the city. When we came in January this year, we found that the collection rate was simply sitting at about 80 to 82%. We also found out that the suppliers were owed an amount of about 6 billion collectively in terms of what we owe into suppliers. Now, part of what we then did was to start put processes in place to ensure that we focused on billing and collection. We also focused on ensuring that we can raise capital for the city. So that's what we did. So we had a war room that was dealing on billing and a war room on collection. We have therefore increased our collection rate. As of today, it's now sitting at 86%. And that is why our budget will be passed on an assumption of 87%, which we think in the next 2 months would have reached an 87% collection rate, with an expectation that towards the end of the year we will reach a 90% collection rate. But our budget as is on an assumption of 87%. We didn't want to stretch it to 90%, so that our view was that we don't want to experience problems 6 months into the new financial year. So we took a very consecutive figure of putting it at 87%. We have therefore allocated money for Joburg Water and City Power in an attempt to try and deal with addressing water losses and electricity losses, which means we are focusing on strengthening the infrastructure, refurbishing the infrastructure, so that we don't lose. Our losses are really sitting at the high unacceptable levels of about between 30 and 35%. So we want to reduce them, and hence our commitment to reduce them to 25%, those water losses and electricity losses. So those are the challenges we have, but we think that we have done well. As of the figures that they received last night, we are sitting at about 1.5 billion in terms of what is owed to suppliers. So we've been able in the last 4 months to reduce that amount from 6 billion to 1.5 billion, and we are monitoring it on a daily basis. We have established the CFO forum that is meeting at least twice a week to focus on who are we paying, at what point are we paying, and thirdly, they're also focusing, are we buying at the right price, because it's an important issue for us whether the goods and services that we are procuring, are we procuring them at the market price. So we are focused on those things. So on a weekly basis, CFO forum is meeting to try and find ways of ensuring that we follow our financial plan.
I know we spoke about the water and electricity losses, but how much is it costing the city when there's ailing infrastructure and there's pipes that are leaking as well?
No, the cost is too high. I think we're losing about 300 million or 324 million for, or just on technical and non-technical losses. So it's a huge amount. I think it's for city power and water. It's relatively around that amount also, of around 300 million, which is a lot of money. And remember, we still buy at the same price from both Rent Water and Eskom. There's no reduction of the price or a discount of any form. So that is why our losses are too high, but it requires us to focus on fixing the infrastructure, dealing with illegal connections, both water and electricity. In that way, we'll be able to ensure that we reduce the water and electricity losses to acceptable standards of probably about 11% or so. And then we could say the city is on the path towards recovery. And that's what we are focused on. And we want to appeal to society and communities of Johannesburg to give us time and space, and in fact, over and above space and time, give us support for us to be able to demonstrate that we do have the ability, the knowledge and the expertise to get out of these current financial problems.
You've been quite critical of the previous administration, of course, that was handling the city's finances. Would you say this is the reason why we find ourselves here, where residents are complaining about, pipes leaking, not having water? Is this the reason?
Well, the previous government or administration would have contributed. As you know, that they passed the budget was in May 2022, which was probably 3.5 billion not funded at the point of it being passed, which meant you had an accumulation every month of a gap that they could not close in revenue. And the revenue assumptions were the budget was passed at a revenue assumption of about 90%, when in fact revenue at that time was sitting at 80%, if not 78%. So you'd see that there was reckless financial planning. They did not take responsibility. All what they wanted was to make noise and pretend that they're good government. They went out on a spending spree and they were spending the money they did not have. So that's the responsibility that they should have taken and accepted that, yes, indeed, we erred as an administration. We did not focus on stabilizing the finances. And I still think they should still commit themselves even today that they want to be part of the solution towards ensuring that we can stabilize the city's finances. However, they've demonstrated already in their responses that they may not be supporting this budget.
Just lastly, it seems as though you're playing a financial catch-up game, trying to ensure that the city's coffers is back to its standardized performance. But what does this mean for the residents? Should they brace themselves for, a steep hike in terms of rates and taxes that they have to pay to ensure that the city's finances are stabilized?
Now we have already passed the tariffs. We are not increasing in fact, our rates and taxes will be only sitting at 2%. We went out on the public consultation at 5.3%. But having understood the economic situation currently and the concerns raised by ratepayers, we had reviewed it and we ended up at 2%, which I think residents will appreciate it and be able to still continue to pay for their rates and taxes. So we think that we have tried our level best to understand the current economic conditions, and hence we have kept our tariffs as down as possible. In fact, electricity and water is basically a pass-through from NERSA and Eskom and Rent Water. So it's just a pass-on. We do not do any addition on that as the city. So that's where we are. But we think residents will support this initiative. They will support this budget, because all of us as Joburgers believe that we have a responsibility to rebuild Johannesburg and make Johannesburg a better city once more and ensure that its finances are proper and are healthy, so that the financial markets out there can begin to take Johannesburg serious once again.
Thank you very much, MMC. Thanks for your time.
Sharp, sharp.
All right, that's the MMC for Finance, Tara Morero there, just explaining and unpacking the monies that will be used to be channeled into various departments that speak to the city's service delivery processes as well. It seems as though he doesn't enjoy the support of some parties from the opposition benches, but he says will continue to present this budget, saying millions have been allocated into looking into the repairing of infrastructure, which speaks to water and electricity, but of course also admitting that they are losing millions to the ailing infrastructure, just like how we saw Masego earlier on, where we saw the local meters, water meters that are leaking and pipes that are leaking as well.
All right, Pule Letshwiti-Jones live for us there in Johannesburg in Braamfontein.